Alright, so John Tavares. No, I think a lot of you have had quite enough of that. Leaf fans like, no. My last video that I uploaded yesterday is all about the Leafs signing John Tavares. If you want to find out more about it there, go there. I talk about him cheering for the Leafs since he fit into that wee jersey right there. But come on, we got other teams to talk about, so let's talk about that. In fairness, the Leafs made 4 other signings, so I'll quickly go through those and then we'll move on. The Leafs re-signed Martin Marincin and they add Josh Joris, Adam Cracknell, and Jordan Subban. Clearly the best Subban. He's a 23-year-old right-handed shot defenseman who's got a bunch of raw skills, but he's not so good in his own end, so he's a bit of a project. Marincin might make the team as like the 7th or 8th D. Cracknell scored 29 goals on a pretty bad Laval team in the AHL last year. He's pretty much a direct Ben Smith replacement. And Josh Joris might make the team as an extra forward. He's just depth. But really, how do you feel? After John Tavares, I don't. But with that, I think it's only fair that we start with the Islanders. They re-signed Thomas Hickey, that's pretty good, and they signed Valtteri Filppula and Leo Komarov. Islanders fans, from a Leafs fan, this might sound rich, but I don't think you had that bad of a day. Alright, it's pretty bad, but it wasn't as bad as some people are saying. You lose your captain, he's in his prime, he's a top 20, top 10 player in the league, he's certainly one of the best centers, that's bad. And your center depth is hurting. But you add Filppula, 1 year, $2.75 million, that's nothing. If the Islanders aren't in playoff contention, that's exactly the sort of player teams are looking for heading into the trade deadline, and he's cheap and his contract's expiring, so they'll take him. You just had a spectacular draft, and you got a bunch of really good young players. Matt Barzal, seriously? So again, your center depth is pretty poor, and it looks like the plan is to go ahead with Thomas Greiss, maybe? They swung and missed on a couple big things. They tried to bring back Tavares. It sounded like they were after Ryan O'Reilly, which might be why he costs so much. They don't really have a goalie. Next year, I think, is going to hurt, but their organization, all the good young players they have, and just drafted, I think they'll be okay. You talk about, oh, this is rock bottom. Look around the league. This is not rock bottom. A lot of teams would beg for some of the young players that you have. The Leo Komarov contract is rough. 4 years, $3 million per. He gets a raise. The numbers are bad. The player, in my opinion, is not as bad as people say, and the person sounds amazing. I've spoken to Komarov a number of times, but he wasn't my teammate. His teammates seemed to love him. And we often laugh that off, but it counts for something. He had a 19-goal, 36-point season a couple years ago, and a 14-goal, 32-point season just the season before this. The season before last. This is that weird time. He only had 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points this year. A bunch of those goals were empty netters, but I don't care who his line mates were. Babcock didn't use him in an offensive role at all. Killed a crazy amount of penalties, and as a center half the time. If you allow yourself to, I think you might just like this player. So let the dust settle, feel bad for a little bit, but then really look at your team. For sure, Lou has work to do, but it's not the end of the world. Speaking of end of the world, the Sabres got 5 assets for Ryan O'Reilly. St. Louis Blues had a hell of a day up the middle, getting Ryan O'Reilly and signing Tyler Bozak. And getting David Perron back. Here it is up on Cap Friendly. The full trade is Tage Thompson, Patrick Berglund, Vladimir Sobotka, a 2019 first, and a 2021 second in exchange for Ryan O'Reilly. In getting O'Reilly, the Blues actually saved $775,000 against the cap. This just might be a trade where both teams win. A lot of people really like the haul that Buffalo got, and why not? The risk for Buffalo is that both Berglund and Sobotka have term, but they can both play hockey. Tage Thompson's a bit of a wild card, 6'5" forward, but he can pan out great. And the picks are magic beans, but you never know, they could be smash hit. The Sabres lose quality in Ryan O'Reilly in exchange for quantity, but the quantity that they got back has some quality. Now, if you're the St. Louis Blues, if you're as good as you think you're gonna be with this new lineup, those picks won't be very high. And to me, I look at the Blues and how they're spending their money, and I actually really like the composition of their roster. They're spending more money at the top, and they're going kind of young and cheap at the bottom. You're gonna need a big performance out of Ivan Barbashev or Nikita Soshnikov. Remember him? You're gonna have to go young, you're gonna have to go cheap, but that's what the best teams in the league do. Spend money at the top, invest in their stars that, for the most part, they've drafted and developed themselves, and then put young, cheap guys around them. Of course, you depend on guys like Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, Evgeny Kuznetsov, John Carlson, Braden Holtby, but Devontae Smith-Pelly was a monster in the final. The Blues are giving a lot of money to a few players, but I look at them and they're all good. They lose Carter Hutton, but gain Chad Johnson. Honestly, I think the Blues had a really good day. They still got a few guys to sign, but they got about 7.5 to do it. They can pull this off. Now I want to see if I can get through everything just by answering questions. Rate my hockey card. 9 out of 1. Okay, now rate my collector's item. Are the Flames the real deal with the real deal James Neal? Whitby's own. Well, the Flames didn't make the playoffs last season, and I think they expected to be like in contention, and they've responded to that by completely changing their team. There was the huge Dougie Hamilton trade. They had Austin Zarnik, Derek Ryan, James Neal. They lost Ferland, but they got Elias Lindholm to lock up. And even though they have a few big name guys to lock up, they have a lot of cap space to do it. Even after after these additions that they've made. I would call that a good position to be in. A 30-year-old James Neal on a 5-year deal is a bit of a risk, but at 5.75, that's probably a bargain. And for a team that wanted more offense, there you go. Could maybe use another guy in net if you're not confident in the young guys. There are a couple meh contracts on that roster, especially up front, but the Flames got wiggle room. After July 1st, I think they got better, and I don't think they're done. What the flipping heck happened to the Jets? Traded Armia and Mason for cap space to not sign Stastny. Oh yeah, so Paul Stastny went to the Vegas Golden Knights. After, if I'm not mistaken, the Golden Knights sort of blocked a Derek Brassard trade to the Jets before the playoffs because they thought they would play them, and they were right. The Jets made a trade with the Montreal Canadiens where they cleared cap space, and we'll talk about that, and they just swung and missed. But you know, the Jets are still the Jets. Paul Stastny would have made them undeniable, but even without him, they're still going to have one of the best offenses in the league. They got a great young goalie. Defense is pretty good, stupid stacked on the right side compared to a lot of other teams in the league. They got a good team regardless, but now they also have some cap space. Just like Calgary, there's got to be a move there. By the way, that trade, the Montreal Canadiens acquire Steve Mason, who I believe they have now bought out, and Joel Armia, a 4th round pick and a 7th round pick in exchange for Simone Bourque, better known as Guy. Hey, we need you to send us someone back for this cap dump, Guy. He only had 3 assists on a pretty bad Laval team last season, but he joins the Manitoba Moose. That's a good team. But Joel Armia is a player and one that can score a couple goals, and that will be very beneficial for Montreal, who because of this trade have 9 picks in next year's draft and 8 in the one after. Now Montreal is a bit of a sleeper team to me. Not sleeper as in they'll be good. I mean, they might be. They got Carey Price. But in just, what are you up to? Because it sounded like they wanted John Tavares. He wasn't interested. It sounded like they were interested in Paul Stastny. He wasn't interested. And now they got like $13 million to spend on re-signing Michael McCarron, Kirby Reichel, Joel Armia, Philip Deneau, and Jacob Delarose, which seems like too much. And they still might trade Pacioretty. And they saved money on the Gouch deal. And they took up $1.3 million for each of the next 2 seasons and buying out Steve Mason like they even need the space. Mark Bergevin is the only GM I've ever seen that's made cap space look like a bad thing. Like, you always want some wiggle room. But dude, your team's rich! Use it! Even if it's on more deals like this one where you eat some contract in exchange for picks and a guy. It's one of those teams where I just don't understand what they're doing. Which teams do you think will try to make a play for Slava Voinov now that the court has dismissed his charges so that I can preemptively yell at them? Well, right now all we have to go off of is rumors, and then it was said that apparently the Kings would have to trade his rights. No one should be signing this guy. And if you do, I definitely don't want to hear you talk about character ever again. Like, you know how earlier I talked about good GMs spend money on stars and then supplement them with young, cheap players? Like, smart GMs put themselves in a position to succeed? If you're sitting there and going, this guy who committed a crime and got thrown out of the country for it could help my team, you screwed up already! And you'll be screwing up again by signing him! Don't do it! For like a wide variety of reasons! Does Jim Rutherford actually know why Jack Johnson was benched, or did he just want to troll John Tortorella? Alright, I don't know how this went so under the radar, but Torts is back. So Jack Johnson, who went from Columbus to Pittsburgh, said, I've been looking to be in a winning culture, which if you're a Blue Jackets fan, you're going, hey. Jim Rutherford says, I don't think he had a bad year, and he was a healthy scratch, and I know the reason why, and it wasn't because of his play. And if you're Torts, you're going, wait just a second! And that is exactly what he did. I'm not going to copy and paste the whole quote. Aaron Portzline wrote about it on The Athletic. It's behind a paywall. But he basically screams about how Jack Johnson, it's BS that he did that, a backhand on the way out, and the Blue Jackets did everything in their power to help him when he was going through his bankruptcy struggles and all of that. He goes off, he's swearing a blue streak about Johnson and Rutherford and everybody in his way. Now, I think that's just Torts being Torts, but one, he's not totally wrong. I think he took it way further than it needed to, and I don't think this last part was intended, but I think it worked. I think it helped endear him to Blue Jackets fans. Because who do Blue Jackets fans hate? The Penguins. And our coach just screamed at the Penguins. Now Johnson, in another article, backtrack, basically going, look, I meant winning culture. The Penguins had back-to-back cups. But it doesn't matter. What was said by both parties was said, and that is how Jack Johnson starts his tenure with the Penguins. Speaking of which, the Pittsburgh Penguins acquire a 2019 conditional 4th-round pick from the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for Connor Sherry and Matt Hunwick. The Penguins shed over $5 million in cap, and they gave a big chunk of that back to Jack Johnson. Of course, they also re-signed Riley Sheahan. You can say what you want about Hunwick, but he's better than a lot of the defenders that Buffalo already has, and Connor Sherry scored 20 goals last year. Again, Buffalo, I think, had a really good couple weeks. I don't really think they're a playoff contender, but they're a lot better than they were 2 weeks ago. Oh yeah, and Rasmus Dahlin. Alright, I'm not the most analytically minded guy, but when I first heard about like advanced stats and stuff like that, what I wanted to know was, alright, well, who's a good player that I think is good but is actually bad, and who's a player I think is bad that is actually good? And one of the first guys I saw people talk about was, Jack Johnson sucks. And I'm like, really? But he puts up points, he's a former 3rd overall pick, how does he suck? And for years, like, every metric out there is like, don't touch this player. And oh, the Penguins did. And it just blows my mind how there's still guys like Calvin DeHaan who are available. There were other defenders available, and they were like, nope, Jack Johnson, that's our guy. I mean, it's the Pittsburgh Penguins, they're gonna be okay, but I just wonder about this signing, man. The term is brutal. Half a decade? Rate my doggo? I would trade a 1st round pick for it. What is Vancouver? Bro, big bucket of yuck. Look, they added a few guys who weren't gonna be at the top of their lineup, but they were players, and the Sabres added a few guys similarly. Except the players the Sabres added, I think, are generally worth the money that the Sabres are paying them. Antoine Roussel, $3 million per for 4 years. Okay. Modified, no trade, bonus laden for a guy who's gonna put up like 10 goals? His career high is 14, he's 28, you know, maybe you put him in a higher role, he gets 15, it pushes 20. You're obviously not getting him for his goal scoring prowess, you're getting him because he's a maniac. Jay Beagle at 32 is getting $3 million for 4 years. No! I know he was a valuable part of the Washington Capitals Cup run, but dude, that's like a 4th line center. Playing behind Kuznetsov and Backstrom. Who's that for you? They got Tim Schaller from Boston. I don't mind that deal at all. I said it earlier, I see the value in bringing in some grit and some leadership, but what wins you a Stanley Cup is being extremely good at hockey. Of course, everyone who plays in the NHL is extremely good at hockey, but you're putting them up against other NHL players. And this isn't even like Phil Pollock, who's on a 1-year deal and you can sell him at the deadline. These guys are like, they're part of the team. The worst teams in the league are the teams that I can't tell what they're trying to be. I don't get what the Canucks are. A few more thoughts on a few more guys because this is getting way too long. Cam Ward gets another $3 million in Chicago. How does he keep doing that? If Corey Crawford is completely back to health and completely back to form and Cam Ward's just a backup, alright, whatever. Luke Shen for 1 year at just $800,000 is an interesting little bet for the Ducks. Peter Mrazek at 1.5 in Carolina could be a steal, or he could just be a 1.5 goalie. Boston getting Yaroslav Halak I thought was smart. Rask goes through these weird stretches where he's either injured or randomly a bad goalie, so it's good to be able to run a goalie who can play. And John Moore, 2.75 for 5 years at just 27 years old. There are worse contracts. Roman Pollock in Dallas, I forgot to talk about him. He got a raise. He's making 1.3. Again, Dallas, all the Leafs loved him. I never thought he was a bad penalty killer. He's strong, he's tough as hell. I think he's got an underrated shot, to be honest, that he never really gets the chance to use on account of he's rarely in the offensive zone. And that's the thing. If this is an everyday player on your roster, you might be in trouble. 7th guy you play in the event of an injury, okay. And Bozak, who I kind of skipped over earlier, getting $5 million. Not the worst term. Centers make a lot of money, and he was a part of one of the most lethal power play units in the NHL last year. He knows how to play his role. You overpay in free agency, that's how it works. JVR, I don't know if I really mentioned it, Philly. By the way, this is the only team he's ever signed a contract with. The Flyers locked him up to a 6-year extension, traded him to the Leafs before it kicks in, and he didn't play a single game as a member of the Maple Leafs that wasn't on that contract. He's gonna bang in goals. He's sick. He's one of the sickest players in tight. In the neutral zone and in the defensive zone, and not so much. But that's not what you're paying him for, is it? Babcock used him very situationally. He was playing him like 14, 15 minutes a night. All the ozone starts, and he put up damn near 40 goals. So if you use him properly, sure, he'll be worth it. Term, Plekanec's going back to Montreal at less than $3 million. That's much better. Vlad Nemestikov getting $4 million to stay in New York. That might seem like a lot, but it sounded like he was threatening to go to the KHL. Bunch of re-signings, especially in the Pacific. Doughty, Thornton, Couture. Some questions before we go. What's Rick Nash going to decide to do? Why hasn't DeHaan been signed yet? When are the Leafs going to lock up Nylander, and to how much? And I'd be interested to see what Kari Lettonen's contract is like, because last year he wasn't that bad. He was just making way too much. Also, all the Dallas fans in the comments, yes, I see your feedback. I am sorry. So that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. If there's anything I didn't cover in this, leave a comment down below. We'll talk about it on the podcast tomorrow. Tell all your friends. Brand new Panic Pizza Steve Dangle podcast tomorrow. Just mentioned that. John Tavares video. Got a whole bunch of other stuff to click. You should click it.